Hello, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Pole Position Podcast. Yes, it's back. I'm going to just be doing an intro and an outro. I filmed this podcast with my good friend and good friend of the channel as well, Jamie Davies, a couple of days ago. We did about 48 minutes worth of footage and discussion, talking about so many different F1 topics that have been going around. It's the first one we've actually spoken about F1. Really since the beginning of the season, which would have been around March, and obviously with F1 winter testing and everything as well. So we went into a lot of discussion about a lot of topics. I hope you guys enjoy it. I will have split it into at least two videos. So I'm going to be doing the intro for the first bit now, and then the next video will be up in a couple of days' time. So yeah, thank you very much, and enjoy the video. So Jamie, what we're going to do is we're going to start off this obviously podcast talking about somebody in the sport that we obviously lost last weekend. That being Sir Stirling Moss. Now, one of the true greats of the sport. Sadly passed away on Sunday at the age of 90, which is a great age, for somebody. Of that era sort of thing as well. But, we never sort of got to see Stirling Moss obviously in his prime and racing. But obviously we've seen him as he's got older. We've seen him do interviews. We've seen him do sort of clips. We've seen, recently online as well during this time of his passing, where we've seen him with Lewis Hamilton and sort of doing videos like that. Everyone talks about him being the greatest driver never to win a world championship. Would you say he's that high?
Yeah, I can understand what they mean. It's a strange status, though. I think if I was a driver and I didn't win the world championship, I'd hate to hear that, because it's like, oh, I was so close. So close. But look, with or without a world championship, Stirling Moss has had a fantastic career. In my eyes, he lived the dream of a racer. Yeah. He toured the world. He proved to be one of the best drivers in the world in his prime. And you look at the stats, I think if I got it correctly here, he won 212 out of 529 races. Now that's pretty special, to win 225 races across all categories of competition in the world of motorsport. Not many can say they've done that. Not back then, anyway. Racing has changed a lot since then. There's a lot more events now. There's a lot more access in the world of motorsport. But Stirling Moss, in a way, started British motorsport. So the likes of Damon Hill, Jenson Button, Lewis Hamilton, David Coulthard, you name it. Without him, they may have not been. You could say they may have not found a path to get into the world of British motorsport.
Yeah, and obviously Sir Stirling Moss, an absolute sort of icon. In terms of Formula One, 66 Grand Prix raced from 1951 to 61, raced with, three sort of main teams. That would be Vanwell, Maserati, and obviously Mercedes, which I think a lot of people are more known for him driving for Mercedes. 16 sort of Grand Prix wins, highly regarded sports driver. But not just in terms of, like you said, Formula One. He had a sort of interested observer, as you would, in terms of not just other motorsports, but sport in general. I think, was it Frank Bruno talking about the other day how, he would speak to sort of Stirling Moss for advice. That just sums up, sort of Stirling Moss in general, really, doesn't it? In the fact that, anybody could sort of come to him, ask him for advice, and, he'd sort of be happy to give it to you. I remember the Lewis Hamilton sort of video that they did as well, when they were driving around in old Mercedes cars. And I think Lewis described it like he literally just, happily to chat for hours, and two Mercedes drivers from completely different eras. But he just had this sort of great sort of way of speaking to somebody. I don't know how to sort of describe it that somebody else hasn't really, but, sort of an absolute gent really in terms of the sport. And, you look at, like you said, you've named drivers. I think obviously Jackie Stewart put an amazing sort of speech out there as well. I think he was on the Sky Sports one the other day and just sort of talked about him. Jackie Stewart obviously has stories galore, so that's Jackie Stewart as a whole. But again, Stirling Moss as well had that. And I can remember seeing clips of him driving around like Aintree, as it were, back in the old days as well. And I think how the sort of the Formula One sport has evolved. How dangerous was it for drivers like that? Like you said, to race, how many races he won, how many races he participated in. How good is that for a driver back then as well, sort of with the safety?
He was in the pure dangerous side of F1 back then, where it was all a learning curve in a way, and safety. That word didn't even exist. It wasn't even in
No.
the motorsport dictionary, which I'm sure you can find at all good retailers. And it's interesting when you look at the pictures of him, where I think it's a picture of him taking his, I don't know if you call them goggles, but he would take them off, and he was black. He was, all over the place, which cannot have been good for you. Not for the air system, not for anything like that. It's all terrible stuff. It's not natural. So
Yeah.
it is fantastic photos, and you go back to when even the checkered flags they were on the race circuit on the track, actually doing it in front of the drivers. I mean, my God, they were brave. Otherwise, they'd get chopped in half.
Yeah.
So it is an incredible period, and I think with Stirling Moss, as you say, with the words of advice he had, I think I only ever really saw him interviewed a couple of times, and there were times now and again that he said things that were a bit controversial and people didn't like what he said, but that's what he was. He was quite an honest person. He didn't really hold back. And I think that's what you want to see in a racer, because they live the high life. They live in the danger. They live in that moment. They look at life outside of motorsport, and excuse my language, a bit shit, where they don't get that feel again. So when they see, I mean, Stirling Moss is one of those people where if someone moaned about something, he'd be like, do what I did. Not easy. So, I loved that about Stirling Moss. He was just honest, and he just said it as it was. And there's not many characters like that anymore.
No, no, exactly. And I think, I'm just looking at a piece that F1 put out the other day, and the amount of people that have sort of spoken about his passing. You've got the likes of the heads of Formula One at the minute, Chase Carey. You've got heads of the teams, as in Zach Brown and Jenson Button, Valtteri Bottas, all the teams, Ferrari, Mercedes, Aston Martin, who he raced with as well. Jaguar had put stuff out. Loads of people have sort of come up and shared their memories about Stirling Moss. Like I said, Lewis Hamilton was up there as well. Pictures of him when they were together. So it was an absolute loss in terms of Formula One. And obviously, condolences go out to the family and friends of Sir Stirling Moss, and what an icon he was for Formula One. Now, in terms of the actual sport, Jamie, I mean, we haven't actually done a podcast in general, actually, since sort of the season, F1 testing, winter testing, which seems like an age ago now in terms of what's actually happened with the sport. So, in terms of your sort of preview, we did a preview for your radio show, your community radio show, and we actually did like a top three of the first race of the season. I have written it down. It is still here.
Am I still in with a chance?
It's a possibility. Well, actually, the Australian Grand Prix is cancelled, isn't it? So no.
No. Next year.
Yeah, that'll be down for next year. I'll put 2021 down for that one. But yeah, in terms of that, the amount of races we've already had cancelled. I'm also looking here about the French Grand Prix as well. I mean, the French Grand Prix doesn't really excite me. So it's a bit rubbish anyway. But in terms of that's meant to be held on the 28th of June. And I think France put a lockdown on where there would be no summer festivals before mid-July. So obviously it's only a matter of time before F1 obviously have to cancel or postpone that. So that would be the 10th Grand Prix to be called off this season. I think two have been cancelled, which is F1, the Australian Grand Prix and the Monaco Grand Prix has actually been cancelled. The rest have been postponed. So just in terms of that, Jamie, I mean, when are we actually going to start F1 this year? Do we even know?
I don't think even F1 know. And I think that's the worry, really. I mean, it's happening in all sports, isn't it? I mean, Wimbledon's gone, the Open's gone.
Wimbledon, yeah.
The Masters had been cancelled. Well, I say that they've been moved to November, but the problem I have with this whole thing is that all you can say for now is, look, it's postponed for now. We just don't know. And I think that's the worry for F1, because you've got sponsors, you've got people who invest in the sport who want their money's worth.
Yeah.
But at the same time, F1 knows what's going on in this world right now, and that is health comes first and human lives come first. So I think for F1, their aim is to at least get 8 races in for this year. I think they should just focus on trying to get 8 races. There's rumours of they're trying to get 18, 19 still later on in the year. If you can do that, then fantastic. But you got to then think about, is it realistic? Because you got to then look into next year. I think Ross Brawn has said that next year they're thinking of going from this year and then the season to end in January, which again isn't really much time to get the cars ready for next season. Which they made the right call of what was it, delaying the
Rule changes.
rule
Yeah.
changes to 2022. They had to do that because there's just other things to worry about right now. So for me, I'm not sure. I can't see. I mean, look, football is the biggest sport in the world. I think you'd agree with me, where they don't know what to do with that at the moment.
Yeah.
And with F1, I can't see there being a race until at least. I can't see there being a race until at least August. But again, I'm just saying that with a guess. I'm not here for a bet to say when it's going to happen because I really don't know. Nobody knows, I don't think. I think all the F1 organisers can do right now is have certain scenarios. So if we can get back to normal in June, we'll do it in July. If we get back to July, then we'll do it in August or something like that. That's all they can do, and just have a backup plan for each certain scenario. So I think sadly we're in here for a while.
Yeah, I think you're right. I know F1 have obviously been looking at a revised calendar for this year, and obviously you say Ross Brawn's been talking about when to actually start them, and could it go into next year? In terms of the Canadian Grand Prix, when that was postponed last week, they did say Chase Carey actually put in his quotes, "We will be looking forward to heading to Montreal this year." So he's already, I don't think he's done if he said that in any of the other ones. So that makes me believe that Montreal or the Canadian Grand Prix would definitely be on that revised calendar, no matter how many races.
But that's because it's down the road for him.
Yeah.
Canada's next door to America, so he only has to walk down the road and you go, right, you can watch this race, no problem.
Just get on the bus.
Just get on the bus, yeah. A 5-star bus, more like.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously that one's been talked about. In terms of, just to go back off on what you said about what Ross Brawn said, I think he said about even if they started in October, they'd still want to do a sort of calendar for this year. In going into January next year, if that was a possibility, would you even want that to happen? Because could that even damage like the 2021 season? Would you rather just have a ruined 2020 but keep next year's season as it is? Because if you're going into next year, would that ruin like next year's championship? Or
I think the only thing that matters is if all 10 teams agree. If all 10 teams agree, then just do it. I'm sure you'll get the fans in. I mean, look, tickets have already been bought for most of these races. They may have done it where, look, your ticket will work for when it happens, or you'll get a refund or whatever they've done. But I think as long as you get all 10 teams on board, then great. My only concern is, I mean, I'm not a businessman, I'm not a money man, but the smaller teams, I don't know how are they coping through this period? I honestly don't know. We know that Mercedes are doing great things with providing ventilators and trying out technology to help people in the hospitals, which is fantastic. I think maybe McLaren might be doing that as well. But these teams can do that. They've got the staff. They're thinking of work for them to do. They've got money to burn, let's be honest. But you look at teams like maybe Toro Rosso, Haas maybe, Racing Point. Racing Point had big problems a couple of years ago, and maybe that could come back to bite them. I don't know. But I just hope that all 10 teams are still strong whenever we come back. And I think that's all that matters. Because at the end of the day, if you don't have all the teams, you don't have all the cars on the track, and you haven't got a show. So it's as simple as that, really. The fans will come. They'll follow the sport no matter where it is. It's just about whether or not these teams can get through it.
Yeah, I mean, I think I think I found something the other day where it said Williams. There was a couple of other teams, Haas. I'm not sure. Racing Point could have been in there. I'm not sure, but a lot of them have furloughed quite a lot of their staff at the minute, just because like you said, it's to sort of save in terms of finance. I think Williams definitely, because where they've been and how much money they get being at the back of the grid for last year's season. They need to sort of do that and prioritize making sure they're staying in the sport in terms of that. So I think that's absolutely vital for them. Just in terms of actually the sport in general, Jamie. I mean, we didn't really talk about it much before the season started, and to be fair, we're still in the before the season has started now. So, So sort of let's just discuss it really. I mean, in terms of going into the season. In March, what was your feelings as to who would do well? Because obviously we've got this point now where if there is a minimum of 8 races and that's all there is, anyone could win the championship, really,
I
couldn't
know. I was
it?
thinking it. You know what? I think it might favour some teams, and you know what? I think I would be really excited because I've said to you in the past, Jack, I don't understand the 20, 21, 22 races. I just think it's too long. We're starting to see that because the way Mercedes are at the moment, their style of racing is incredible. We can't forget that. But for the entertainment side of things, it's done races before we reach Abu Dhabi.
Yeah.
And for me, I want to see less races. I keep thinking of, I would love it if F1 did it where you had 1 year of completely different circuits with one or two, Monaco, British Grand Prix, you got to have them in there. But then let's go somewhere else. And then we'll go back to them next year. And then we'll go back to them the year after. Something
Mm,
different. I just
mm.
feel like there's a lot of circuits where I'm not saying there's anything wrong with them. It's just let's have more of a mix. There's plenty of circuits out there that can host F1. We know that. South Korea had a circuit, India had a circuit, and they just got abandoned sadly. But for
Turkey was
me,
one of my favourites.
oh, Turkey was amazing, exactly, and that is going back a few years.
Yeah.
But I mean, Vettel and Webber loved that circuit.
Oh yeah, very much.
So for me, I just look at it and think I would love to see it. If I really hope my fingers and toes are crossed and my quiff that we actually have 8 races because I think Ferrari can look at it and think, look, we've got a
Mm,
chance here. Because normally
mm.
within the 10 races or so in the past, they've been in contention. And if
Yeah,
anything, they was leading the championships.
yeah.
So I think it could be more exciting than we've had over the last few years, but we'll see. But I just think there's too many races anyway. So who knows? Who knows?
Yeah. I think maybe actually when we sort of next do an episode of this, I think what I'd like you to do is if we did have a revised 8 grid calendar only, I'd like you to pick the 8 that you'd like because obviously we have some crap in there. We can agree on that. There are a few races that we wouldn't really have on the calendar that are
No.
there for money. We know that.
Oh, yeah.
So, if we could pick our own, maximum of 8 races, it'd be interesting to see what we would put and whether we were sort of together on that. So I think maybe we should do that. I obviously don't
Yeah,
want
yeah.
you to do it now because I don't want to put you on the spot.
To be honest,
But
I've probably got my 8.
do you want to go then? I mean, you're happy to go if you want.
Nah, let's do it next time.
Okay. What I'll do is I'll write them down, and obviously if you write them down as well, we'll go through it. And it'll be interesting actually to see if we're exactly the same or not. I think that would be interesting to see. I mean, I think both of us can guarantee that Abu Dhabi won't be on it, but I mean, yeah. But just in terms of like before the season started, who did you feel? Did you think it was going to be another? If we had like the main calendar as it would have done in March, had we sort of known in the beginning of March, did you think Lewis Hamilton would win again or?
I think Hamilton would have won it again, and I think Mercedes would have got a 1-2 in the championship.
Hmm.
I think the reason being is I was watching a video by Daniel Ricciardo during testing, and he was asked about the steering wheel that they had, when they pushed in. Was it
Yeah,
pull out or push in or something like that? And it would change
yeah,
the way they could steer. And all the other teams were moaning about it, but then some actually thought, yeah, we'll do that. Daniel Ricciardo said this is why Mercedes are one of the greatest teams we've ever seen. They always want to improve. They could be the best team in the world, and they'll straight away, literally a minute after they've won the championship, Toto Wolff in the back of his head is thinking, right, what do we do to win next year?
yeah,
That is the mentality of Mercedes, and I think they would have done it again. The rules and regulations are the same, and I think they would have nailed it. I can't see why they wouldn't win it again. Ferrari, though, I think Charles Leclerc would have been more of a threat again because of the experience he's had after one season. And he's had a fantastic debut season. He won more races than Vettel. Can't
mm,
beat that. That's a 4-time world champion. Whatever you think about Vettel, he's still won 4 world championships. He knows how to win a race. So
yeah,
for me, I think Mercedes would have done it, but I think it would have been more about what would have Leclerc done this season and what would have Verstappen have done this season, because they are the 2 biggest drivers right now. And I think on the mid-table side of things, I'd have loved to have seen how Ocon would have got on with Ricardo.
yeah. Yeah, that would have been interesting actually. And what I find, I know both of us aren't sort of Lewis Hamilton mega fans. Obviously, we both have respect for what he's done and what he is doing in terms of the sport. But I love how you've said Leclerc and Verstappen are the 2 big drivers in F1 right now.
Yeah, I think in terms of the future, that them 2 are the ones to watch, because I don't think Hamilton. I think Hamilton's got three years left.
Yeah.
The reason being is because he's there to break. We know who a record that hasn't been done, which I think he can do it.
Do you think he
And
would retire after doing that though, or would he wait?
I don't know, because what's there to fight for? I mean, look, if he won 8 world championships, even 7's a good achievement, because if anything, you are joint, but you want to do
Yeah,
it yourself, don't you? You want to be the
of
record
course.
holder.
Yeah.
I think if I was Lewis Hamilton, if I was him, I would have gone, yeah, I'm done. I've
Yeah.
won 8 world championships. I've got nothing to prove. The only thing you can do then is race wins, try and set a benchmark with that, because he'll beat Michael Schumacher's race wins. There's no doubt about that.
Yeah.
So for me, I think it's all about who comes after Lewis Hamilton, and that for me is Leclerc, Verstappen. At least them two. They're the poster boys for me. And especially Leclerc, he's just another thing. But for me, Verstappen, he's not messing around. He really wants this, and I think it's great. You know, we want to see youngsters come through and then get stronger and stronger each year. It just shows that with people like Verstappen, it takes time. But it's
Mm.
all about grabbing a race win, because we know what happened to Nico Hulkenberg. He didn't really get the teams he wanted, really. But because he missed out in Brazil in 2012, I think his career could have been a lot different.
Yeah, and of course, when he missed out last year in Germany as well, I think that sort of sealed his fate for the future at Renault as well.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. It's a shame, but sadly in F1, if you don't grab the opportunity, it goes straight away. In other industries, you might be okay, but not in F1.
No, and I agree. Actually, interesting because we've gone from Nico Hulkenberg to the team, the man that sort of replaced him at Renault, Ocon. You said in that you were interested to see how he got on with Ricardo. Now, obviously, we know from sort of past things with Ocon, his teammates don't always get on with him.
No, no, Sergio Perez. Well, he doesn't like him at all. But he got on with Lance Stroll, but that's probably because his dad is his boss.
Yeah, yeah, he sort of
Uh,
has to.
yeah, he's sort of got to respect Lance Stroll's dad, who's paying his wages. Well, but no, I think, but again, in a way, Max Verstappen could be seen like that, where
Mm,
he maybe have moments with teammates, or especially with opposition drivers, but I think that's just natural. I think
mm.
if an F1 driver's not up for their teammate not getting on with them and they hate that feeling, then tough shit.
Yeah,
It's F1. You're all against each other in a way. Now and again, you will have to work as a team, because you're told to stay behind them or something like that, or the Fernando's faster than you, and you have to cry and let your teammate pass. But I just see it as a thing you got to take on board, and that's why I think Max Verstappen will win a world championship, because he's got the mentality. Leclerc, even with the Singapore race, I think it was, he was having a right go at his team, because the pole position plan didn't work. You know, him
mm,
to lead the race after a few laps, and he was having a go saying, "Why am I behind Vettel?" Which just shows he wants it. And a lot of
yeah.
people say you're being too aggressive, you're being too greedy, but if you're not hungry for success now, then when are you? That's what I'd always question with anyone in F1.
Yeah, exactly. And I think a week after or 2 weeks after, he did exactly the same in Russia as well, when he was on
Yeah,
pole. And obviously Vettel overtook him and he was like, aren't we doing like the strategy and sort of what's going on with that? And to be fair, as much as I like Leclerc, I loved Vettel's response when he was just like, well, if he wants to overtake me, he has to catch me. He was just like,
yeah,
that's a four-time world champion right there. Like he's not going to let this
exactly,
go.
exactly.
And sort of in terms of Vettel, obviously Jensen Button on the Sky Sports podcast that they've been doing, or vodcast that they've called them, or whatever the hell that is, they were told to sort of name their sort of top 5 drivers in the sport. And I think Jensen Button listed Michael Schumacher, Lewis Hamilton, Fernando Alonso, Mika Hakkinen, and then he also put in, he obviously had to say, and this is obviously going on in terms of what you've said as well, I have to say Max Verstappen, in terms of he didn't win, obviously didn't race with him for many years, but seeing his performances, and he highlighted Brazil 2016 as sort of a sort of major sort of turning point in terms of Verstappen. I mean, that race in Brazil with the wet tyres and sort of how he dealt with them conditions sort of highlighted how good Max Verstappen could be, even in 2016. So obviously he's mentioned him, but he also mentioned Sebastian Vettel. and sort of praised him immensely and said, you don't become a four-time world champion with ease. And he is still a four-time world champion. He has struggled, obviously, the last few years. Struggled last year in terms of having a rookie driver and Leclerc beat him and sort of push him throughout the season. But he said, we'll see that he came back stronger. He is an immense talent, and we'll see that once again when we get racing this year. In terms of Sebastian Vettel, we said last year when we did our predictions that he'd actually win the championship last year.
I know, yeah.
in terms of obviously Vettel this year, he's out of contract at the end of the year. Do we see him? I don't want to say back to his best, because obviously winning four world championships in a row is sort of impossible to do again. At Sebastian Vettel's age, sort of thing. Do we see him at least coming back and fighting Leclerc? What we want to see. I mean, we don't want to see him making mistakes. Do we think Sebastian Vettel, can obviously be better this season when he gets underway?
I think I've been having this in my head for a while, where there's I have no idea if it would happen, but I think the best thing for Sebastian Vettel is to go back to Red Bull. A lot of people can say, why take a step back? And I'm thinking it's not always about progressing. For me, you got to look back and think, where was your success? Where did it work out? Where did it flow for you? Where was your best racing? And it was at Red Bull. And who's still there? Christian Horner, Adrian Newey. They're all still there.
Yeah.
And for me, why not go back there? I think there'll be less pressure for him. And I think, if anything, he'll go for it more. But while he's at Ferrari, in my eyes, I've said this to you a lot in the past, Ferrari is like Real Madrid. They get the best drivers in the sport.
Yeah.
Like Real Madrid do. They get Cristiano Ronaldo, you name it. They sign the best. And what happens? The fans love them the moment they come in. But then the moment they go on the pitch or out on the track, the fans look at them with pressure. They give them the eyes, you could say, of, right, you got to do it for us. You're flying the flag. And all the best perform at this level. Vettel hasn't done that. He's won a few races. That's great. But has he really been close to a world championship? No. Not that I can recall. 2015 was between Rosberg and Hamilton. 2016, the same scenario. 2017, okay, I think he finished second, but he didn't.
Yeah, he did.
He didn't win it. He didn't win it. He wasn't. I think if you can get to the final race and contend, then I think you still had a good season. It's just unfortunate. Yeah. Alonso was able to do that with Ferrari twice. 2010 and 2012, he was that close. He was just unlucky.
Yeah.
So for me, I think Vettel should go back to Red Bull after this season, see what he could do throughout the rest of this year, whenever the races come back. And again, that's another thing to talk about. Contracts. How does that work? Surely they have to extend them until this current season finishes. So for me, I think Vettel's got to prove himself. But I honestly think if he gets outraced by Leclerc in terms of qualifying and racing and also the championship, if all three of them happen against him, then why should Ferrari keep him?
Yeah. But the other question would be, would Red Bull take him?
Again, don't know.
Yeah.
Would it be a swap? Would Max Verstappen go to Ferrari?
Or would they let that happen?
I don't know. I honestly don't know. I can't see Red Bull keeping Verstappen if the car's not there. Again, we don't know what this season was going to bring, but I think they were going to finish third again. Or at least come close to Ferrari and go for second. So, again, Max Verstappen at some point has got to look ahead and think, is Red Bull the team to bring me that world championship?
But interestingly, he signed that contract at the beginning of the year, and I'm sure in his quotes, he was like, I want to win the world championship with this team and this engine manufacturer being Honda. So he must have been given assurances to how well that car could perform this year or next year, depending on, the regulations or whatever Honda were bringing as well. Surely he must have been, didn't he sign a 3-year deal? So surely he must have been given something.
It was quite an extension, and I think maybe Verstappen is proving to us that he's loyal. So we'll see.
You can get out of any contract. I'm not saying you would stay. You can get out of any contract. It's not like a...
But then there's another seat, Alexander Albon. He's a great driver from what we've seen so far. But again, we'll just have to see. That's what I think. I've got no reasons for it. I just think sometimes if there's an opportunity to go back with a group that you did everything with, it's like a normal job. You know, if you went to a new job and you didn't like it, but then the people that you had great memories with at your previous job, and then they tell you, oh, you can always come back. It's like, yes, I would love to come back. I fucking hate this job. So yeah, it's a tricky one. I mean, I think Vettel's calm. He was interviewed when they did the car launch, didn't they, in Italy or something like that? And he seemed calm about it. I think they all are. They're F1 drivers. If you're not calm as a driver, then what are you doing? Unless you're Pastor Maldonado.
I knew you were going to say that. I knew you were going to say that.
I'm too predictable these days. But yeah, it's going to be interesting. But I just think that might be what could happen. But we'll see.
Yeah, what I'd love to see is there to be 8 races and Vettel to win a championship at Ferrari, and then he could just be like, I'm out of contract, I could just retire. You know, I would like to see that scenario.
Yeah.
Because, if he's won 5 world championships, he's not going to catch Hamilton now, I don't think. So he could just be like, well, you know what, I've just won a championship at Ferrari, who cares? And
I don't think Vettel wants to do this forever. I think we've things here and there where I think his mind has been elsewhere, and you have to be fully focused in this kind of job. So I think he misses family now and again, Jack. I think we've heard he's had a kid. I think that's what's really tough for F1 drivers. Where even Kimi Räikkönen, he's a right softy, really. He's always with his son now. I think what he loves about F1 now is there's no pressure on him. His name gets him the contracts. But also, he's at a team where he's helping them develop, if anything, and they love him for it. So, it can sometimes be a great thing in the world where Vettel might want to take a step back and do other racing somewhere else. So, I think for Vettel, that's what could happen. But as you say, if he somehow won the World Championship with Ferrari, that would be amazing because it would feel like the Schumacher era again, where it's a German doing it at Ferrari. So we'll see.
Yeah, I'd love that. And I think he did a video the other day on Ferrari's Twitter or whatever, and he was at home and he was asking answering people's questions, and he just looked so relaxed. He's like, I'm at home, I'm with the family, and he looked so relaxed. He was like, that's what Vettel, I think, is sort of striving to be. Do a couple of years, and if it doesn't work out or whatever, look how relaxed he was in the video. I think he'd just be happy. I think as much as we criticize Rosberg for leaving Mercedes and not challenging Lewis Hamilton, he actually looks so happy now. So I sort of think, well, if that's what you wanted to do, Nico, that's absolutely fine. Obviously, us as fans wanted to see that fight again. But he looks relaxed. He's doing his stuff. He's with his family. So, whatever, if that's what you want to do.
I mean, I've noticed with Vettel, he's a lot funnier. He's got sense of humour. I'm not saying he didn't have that in his early years, but in his early years, he wasn't
completely. I agree.
He wasn't a likable driver. That was a focused Vettel. He was young. He was determined.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people liked him for it, but he didn't care because he would go on to win every race. I mean, let's not forget the multi 2-1. That that burnt a lot of hearts, I think, at Red Bull. And
that drink of water, he just literally downed that whole drink of water in that press
if it was vodka, he would have gone a bit like, I'm still downing it, but it was funny when he did that. But he just stared and thought, "This is the most awkward podium ever. Just got to get through it."
And then what was funnier is when they do that video, two moments later, it's him against Kvyat. I just think it's so funny, how the tables have turned, and it's just he goes from being that one to then having a go at somebody like that, and I think Kvyat was like, well, that's racing, and he was like, well, racing, it's like bumper cars. I was just like, this is absolutely hilarious. This is so funny. I love. Yeah, it'd be so good. But like we said, it just all depends on what goes on in terms of the season. So I hope you enjoyed the part 1 of the podcast, and stay tuned for a couple of days' time for part 2 will be out as well. Thank you very much.